So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome today. We're excited about our guest that we're having on the show today, and I'm going to introduce him in a moment. But before we get started, I would like to just sort of do a little bit of housekeeping and a little bit of honoring Huntington Bank. Huntington Bank has been a sponsor of this series and many other things that we've done over the years, particularly in media and anything related to storytelling. Jonathan Kirsting, who's Vice President of all things storytelling and media, is also on the call today, and he's an integral part of the team at the Tech Council. And I also would like to give a shout out to Brian Kennedy, who has been behind the scenes as executive producer, in addition to all the other things that he does each and every day, as well as the rest of the team who make sure that this noontime conversations are not only enjoyable, but run smoothly and matter. So one of the things that today is, it's October 12th, and it's Indigenous Day. And many of you know that in previous years, it was known as Columbus Day, but Pittsburgh, if you don't know, actually really does have a deep background in terms of this being a tribal land. And I would encourage each and every one of you to read about that, or when you have a chance, go to the History Museum, because there is a lot about the French and Indian War. There's also a lot about the many, many hundreds and hundreds of years of tribal presence in our region. And actually, most recently, in the 60s, 1/3 of Seneca tribal's land was taken by the US government to create the Kinzua Dam northeast of this city. So that project was built as a way to help towns across the Allegheny River to deal with flooding. But really little consideration was given to the native people living there. So nearly 600 Seneca were displaced and thousands of acres were flooded. So yes, there was Indian land here. And so I encourage you to do a little bit of reading and get cognizant about the Seneca Nation tribe. So I do want to now bring up Mark Thomas. Mark Thomas is joining us today, and we are going to set the stage with him, and talk about the work that he's done and who Mark Thomas is, the man, and a little bit about the PRA and work related to things that are very near and dear to the work at the Tech Council, is making sure that this is an amazing place, Southwestern Pennsylvania, for people to build their lives and build companies and land here. And with the changes of COVID, I hope to do a little bit of a dive in to just sort of explore about what kinds of things have changed and what he's seen. So we've muted your microphones and there's a chat. So I would encourage each and every one of you to engage in that. Jonathan will keep his eye on that. So without any further ado, I'm bringing Mark Thomas to the program. And before we talk, Mark, about this regional brand and the PRA, that you just rolled out, let's just talk about Mark the man. Who is Mark? Before you came here, you had a journey from, I think, Columbia and MIT to the publishing business. You're a little bit of a writer, and you've done some early work with the mayor, who's still the mayor of Los Angeles, and you've done some time in economic development in New York. So if you could just sort of tell us a little bit about Mark, that would be fabulous.
Sure. So first, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. A little backstory. So I've always been interested in economic development. I think when I was younger, I thought journalism and writing was my way to express my thoughts. Couldn't necessarily see that as a career prospect at 16. And so I spent 2/3 of my career working in communications. I grew up in the Atlanta area and then moved to New York in my late 20s. And it was there that I became a publisher of a news organization at a time where journalism was fully being disrupted by tech. And so it was quite exciting to think of all the tools and new technologies to help a broad community understand economic development issues. And so it was kind of early 30s for me when I started to think, okay, what do I do next? This has been exciting. I enjoy writing about these topics. I actually want to be a change agent within the public sector. And so I went to business school at MIT and used that time to really study how government and how societies kind of manage innovation and manage these big themes. At the same time, you had Occupy Wall Street. You had all these themes that were very clear that as a society, we were kind of merging into two different directions. And so I really wanted to look at like issues of inclusion and themes around that area. When I graduated, I went to Los Angeles. Fortunately, Mayor Eric Garcetti took me in as a person who really had never worked within the space. And I served in two roles. First, through a nonprofit called Fuse Corp, which takes executives who've never worked in the public sector and gives you like a senior advisor role within it. And then I was hired to be his director of operations innovation. And in both of those roles, I worked on systematic reforms that impacted Los Angeles' economy. That was exciting. As my term was wrapping up there, I went back to New York City and worked for their Economic Development Corporation in a brand new role as their head of partnerships. And just a little bit about their structure. They are the largest real estate owner in New York with over 60 million square feet of property. And they use the revenue they generate to really drive industry investment and economic development. And so I was there for a few years, and then as things got interesting, I started to look for a new home and found Pittsburgh. And so that's really my circle here, and I'm excited to be here.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So you're at the helm of the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance, which is actually part of the Allegheny Conference. So can you tell us what is the PRA? I mean, I know what it is, and but talk about the history, the mission, and its also relationship with the Pittsburgh Chamber. Yeah.
So the conference was founded over 75 years ago, really to serve as a civic leader for the region. PRA was actually founded about 2 decades ago as a separate entity and was consolidated as part of the conference to really support the region's competitiveness for investment. Our peers across the country actively compete for investment, for talent, all the issues that really drive forward investment. And so we absorbed under the conference and gave us institutional support to make that happen. The chamber serves as our policy arm. And then they also manage the network of regional chambers, just because we're so fragmented as a region. We also have a research arm that drives a lot of the economic thinking that impacts our work. And so what PRA does on a day-to-day basis, we're talking to businesses, we're talking to consultants, we're talking to entities that are looking for new markets to invest in and try to make the case for Pittsburgh. And we also work closely with local businesses if they need support in staying here or expanding. And so we really have those two buckets that drive our work. But comprehensively, the conference is really the voice for not just business, but for the future of the region. And how do we make sure that public-private partnerships, economic development, inclusion, all those things are aligned to keep us moving forward.
Okay, great. And you were making reference to the Economy League. Is that the other organization you're referring to that does the research on? Okay. So recently, I think just in the last couple of weeks, and Jonathan on our team has been involved in that, you actually have launched out a new marketing brand. So can you talk about that work and then just talk about, what goes into developing and thinking about a regional brand and why this might be different?
Yeah, so one thing I noticed, I'll kind of speak to when I first came. You talk to 30 different people about Pittsburgh. They all have a different way of talking about it. And one consistent theme was we leaned heavily on our history. And I think it comes from this humble place of where we survived things that very few places have been through. And so there is that humility there. But if you're looking for a place that's really exciting, that captures kind of what you want to build or be, you somewhat need a different message. And so the brand is really designed to speak to that aspect of individuals. And it gives us a shared document, a shared approach, a general framework of how you would talk about Pittsburgh to someone who's looking to invest, for a company looking to stay here and expand and help their own talent understand the value proposition that we offer. the brand does that in a unified form. And in launching the brand, it gives us an opportunity to work closely with all of our partners, which range from the tech council, the airport, to nonprofits, to businesses, to our 10 county partners, who all now have a guidebook on how they would promote the region.
And so that's interesting. So we all know here that we tend to be proud and entrenched in the past, but aren't some of those things assets for us as well? Or am I just being too provincial?
They are, but it matters if you understand like the foundation. But if you're a business and you really want to understand, can this market help me scale to hire 1,000 people, 5,000 people? Can I be immersed in the community and make a difference? We have to be able to speak to that. And so the brand moves us beyond the foundational history to those assets that we think are more key to the stuff that we have to respond to.
Yeah, so probably me kicking it off by talking about you know, our ancestors and what we've done on the day of Indigenous Day isn't aligned with the thinking of going forward. Well, I think.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go on.
Yeah, no. Yes, and I think what makes the region so iconic, and this is what drew me to Pittsburgh, is it does have this amazing history, and it's one of the richest American cities as far as its story. And I think we definitely don't want to shy away from that. But the future, and when you really tour the city and see what communities are building and what people want the region to become, like that is exciting. And I think it is that message that we wanted to make sure is at the forefront.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And so as we look out rolling the brand, what are some of the strategies that are in place to do this? And so how do we make sure that it touches each and every one of us that are in business and embracing it?
First, we're actually kind of building awareness internally first. And so that's working with everyone from our community development corporations to developers, so they understand this is how you talk about the brand. And I think you'll see more aggression, because even communities that have been forgotten for a long time really want to attract business and make sure their entrepreneurs and businesses thrive. So you'll see a lot of that. The second is you'll see us promoting way more aggressively than I think you have before. And I made it very clear over the first year that I want us to be well positioned to compete for every type of investment and growth company that we hear some word is out there looking for a new home. And I think in being part of those conversations, we can ensure that they're making a decision that enables them to become a Pittsburgh company and live the values that we really hold dear. And so I don't want there to ever be a period where people don't know what PRA is working on, or what companies we're supporting, or what talent initiatives that we're driving to make sure people find a home here.
And so what was your impression coming here? I mean, first of all, you took the job, but then coming here as a Black man, coming into a place where, you know, we have, you know, a somewhat diverse community, but we also have a bifurcated community. Do you have any perspective on that?
Yeah, to me, I will say it was important. All the cities I've loved have like a Black community that is key. And Pittsburgh was no different than that. Like, you know, I understood and had the chance of meeting August Wilson, and that was just a transformative experience. And so I was always following Pittsburgh as a result of that. And to some extent, you don't know the deficits or challenges of a place until you live here. But I will say, when I went on a tour before I was deciding to move here, seeing those challenges and seeing the state of some of the Black communities actually encouraged me to want to be here. And so the thing about economic development, I think this is important, like, you don't want to just make a rich place richer. Like, that is not exciting at this age for me. And so when I saw the Hill District and Homewood, and even when I toured the 10 county region and saw Newcastle and places where I said, okay, I can really make a difference if we do this right. Obviously, we want to build where we're strong in our like high-tech sectors, but it was really how do you create a shared vision that can elevate everyone that really enticed me to come here. And so in moving here, I've been fully embraced as an outsider, because I know it's an issue for a lot of local folks. But I wanted to build allies, and I wanted to get to know people as well as I could before I really felt comfortable promoting the place. And I think, even though obviously half my time has been in quarantine, I was able to get like an immediate understanding of the region before we really started actively promoting.
Yeah, that's fair. And one of the things that I know that you had done right away, even before quarantine, is you actually spent time outside of Allegheny County.
Yeah, and one of them, so I'll share, it was important for me, for them to know that, yes, I worked in these big urban cities, but I grew up in like the Westmoreland County of Atlanta. So I understand what it's like in a lived experience to be not the shiny object that people want to invest in, or the school, go to the schools that the big corporates don't want to partner with. And so I wanted to make sure they understood I grasped that, and I viewed them as crucial to our thriving as a region. And frankly, if the broad 10 counties don't succeed, you hear a lot of people assume you can just fix the city and then that solves the problems. That's somewhat antiquated thinking. Like, regions that thrive generally thrive across borders. And so I wanted to make sure that they were pulled into the broader strategy for us to elevate.
And how many counties does the PRA cover?
10.
10. Okay, across southwestern PA. I keep forgetting whether it's 10 or 14.
It's actually a lot of ground. Like, you know, some places take an hour to get to.
Right.
Yeah, but what I do like is there is a sense of shared responsibility and shared interest in each other.
And I imagine those counties have felt left out. And when you talk about Pittsburgh, you're now talking about Pittsburgh as a region, even in the brand.
Yes,
So not,
and I think we try to make sure with the brand that they felt part of it. And I wanted to understand, what do they view as our strategic opportunities? I want to understand the universities, the talent pools, and really get a sense of the culture, so that we're promoting it, we can actually be authentic in our pitch.
And so what about, as we look at attracting, you know, both new jobs, people, right? And our organizations have really been talking about talent. I mean, that's all people really talk about, right? I mean, getting the greatest people to work on some of the hardest problems and to support those industries all up and down the supply chain. So, I mean, talent is the capital, right? Talent is the asset. That's what it is. It's not the brick and mortar, it's the people. So how will your work in this brand space help us attract diverse talent to the region? And how will the brand engage with, you know, workers and people who already are here? Because there's always that kind of tension, right? You know, what about me? I'm here.
Yeah, and I think that's, at least in how we've structured the brand, we put people first. And so what we try to understand are, what are the assets that people like about being in Pittsburgh? And that's the natural environment, that is the culture, that's the creative economy, it's all those things. And those are things that people, when they get past kind of the cost of being here, they want to know that. So there's that. Then there's a piece of, how do we make sure people who are here understand the opportunities that are available? And the Pittsburgh Passport really fits into that framework. The third is, we understand that companies have to really believe, if they're attracting talent or hiring locally, that they have pipelines for both. And so we do really well if you have entry-level talent out of the universities, and just the pool of people who are leaving is really a pool of talent that people can retain and invest in over the future. The piece that we definitely have a disadvantage to some of the markets with a larger population is kind of the 25 and up. And I think for us to really address that, we have to just be a place that people can feel they're not missing out on excitement from being in an innovation hub,
Right.
but they can also buy a house and live a nice life here. And so that message has to be elevated into how we market the region.
But what about, like, what are you finding since COVID, right? Like, I mean, you're still working during COVID.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we
what
actually,
are you finding?
yeah, so we actually, I don't think we knew what would happen at first, but it's actually led to an uptick in the types of companies that are now looking at Pittsburgh. And so I suspect, because a lot of people aren't making necessarily decisions now, but they're scouting for 2021, 2022. And so I feel so good about when we are in a full-fledged recovery, the types of investments that we'll be able to announce. I think there are companies that our local people will say, wow, that's coming to Pittsburgh, or that's investing in Pittsburgh, I can stay here. Or industries that really are at the forefront. And I think our next few years will be bright as far as at least what we can do to contribute to vitality.
Are you seeing changes in trends though? Like, what in our world in tech, Microsoft just announced Friday that everyone can work remotely. And, Spotify's already done that, Twitter's already done that, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think about that? Are you hearing any kind, and obviously we're going to talk about tech and you represent wider than just tech. So what are you hearing and how do you think that will affect us?
Well, so I think there are a couple of things, right? There will be now flexibility for people to kind of live wherever they want. And I think in that bucket, we have to compete for people who want to live and set up shop in Pittsburgh. And I think that's where I do think there will be an interest in like co-working spaces and shared community. And it's important for us to have that message front and center. The second is, I think we'll be on the positive end of companies are leaving the expensive markets because they can now employ people in alternative markets, which is, there was this arrogance of just Silicon Valley, New York, and just those hubs that like you had to only be here, and if you weren't here, you weren't important. And so if anything, COVID has undercut that thinking. And so I think that is good for all of the markets like ours that are actually trying to like attract some of those investments. And the last piece is we're actually competing for opportunities now where there may just be less of a real estate footprint, but the employees would have access to remote working. And so it forces us to look at issues of fair broadband and 5G and some of this infrastructure investment so that remote workers within the region have the same access as other places.
So do you think there's a question, it's a longer question, but I think that really what she's asking is that the immigration restrictions overall, you've been hearing about that? Like, is that affecting?
Well, that is an area that, at least through our chamber, we're advocating for a more open policy. Like, this has been like years in the making where it's gotten increasingly harder. And just a lot of the folks I know who are not American are now looking at other places versus everyone wanted to be here. And there's just a lack of certainty. I feel like I've even written a number of just support letters for friends who are trying to stay here, who are brilliant at what they do. And so I think for us to really stay as a place where tech and innovation is driven, we have to have a more open society or else that's going to change.
So, it's funny, a few years ago, we were in the Valley, Silicon Valley, and I had a chance to talk to Sheryl Sandberg, who's the COO of Facebook, and kept up with her for a little while. And her whole point was, I don't need to open up an office in Pittsburgh because I get the greatest kids and young people that come out of Carnegie Mellon and they come and work for Facebook. I don't need any more brick and mortar. These people can come here. Now, of course, fast forward, we have Facebook Reality Labs here, and they have a great footprint. what can we be doing to sort of shift that, over time in terms of the conversations that are had with potentials that are here?
Yeah, and so I think
Apple's
here.
People,
Apple's here.
Google is here. But the conversations now aren't around brick and mortar. I mean, and I think that's the thing that we need to really reckon with as a community. And I think it's what you mentioned earlier about destination and excitement. So I want to pick up on both of those points. It's not brick and mortar, but it's also about the sense of being in a place that has some level of excitement. And I would say diversity, and diversity of everything.
Yeah, so I think I'll share kind of some current activities. I lead this thing now called the Red Team, which includes the universities, the city, Allegheny County, and that was established really to create the shared cooperation toward attracting the Facebooks of the world. And I think the universities have really stepped up their investments to identify their partners. And I think Honeywell is an example of where CMU had a great relationship with them, and then they're investing now in the region. And so I think you'll see a lot more of that. And that is part of strengthening just that broader community. The second piece, I do think like the Facebooks of the world are evolving, where it was just this thinking that you had to be in the action and there were just only a couple places where that has happened. And I think if anything, that's contributed to just the lack of inclusion in tech, or at least inclusion in the way that we want to see it. And so when you look at just the announcements that have happened since the protest in May, or the companies investing in people of color, they're standing up new VC funds. Google last week just gave $5 million to 75 Black entrepreneurs. There's so much happening now that is really focused on bringing inclusion into the conversation. Virgin's Hyperloop investment is going to West Virginia. So there's a lot that's in the pipeline that gives us a fair shot at really investing in our region in a way that would have been harder 10 years ago. And so I think the environment has shifted, and it's important for us to have our brand and our message and be part of the conversations so that we can actually deliver more for the region.
So as someone who's lived in different places and mostly more urban areas, and you've been here for like, I guess a year, close to a year and a half, and realized 7 months of that is COVID. What surprised you about Pittsburgh, and what do you wish for?
I think the biggest surprise has been just like, at least like living in the city, it's like, it is an intellectual hub. And it's a very activism-driven community. So all those things actually make it quite exciting if you're inquisitive. And so I don't feel like there's a shortage of just like mental stimulation between like the culture and art. And so when I talk to people, they kind of assume that I'm in like a Rust Belt place if they don't know Pittsburgh. And all of that is like enriching. The other piece that it just feels it feels like a small town in some sense, in a good way. Meaning I don't feel like I'm missing anything by not being in the heart of Brooklyn. I feel like I'm getting kind of everything that I need as far as like lifestyle. Now, I am older and I know younger people probably want to party more and have more social stuff than maybe I do. And I think that's stuff that will eventually be built out over time. And
so any kind of final words that you, I think there is one person that's saying we're in a season where we need to keep working at home. Are you hearing that, working from home diminishes collaboration? Are you hearing that from potential businesses?
Well, I definitely think the physical aspect will be muted until COVID is resolved. What gives me some hope is everything's paused, no matter where you are. So even if I was still in Brooklyn, the lifestyle that I would have had there would have been deeply altered. Yeah, and so I think it gives us a chance to catch up, at least in strategy and execution, with places that were killing us years ago, and position ourselves for a much stronger decade than we probably were positioned for when I came.
So what do you do for fun? What do you do?
Now it's like, we go to, you know, and I have my partner here too. So we'll socially distance with people. I took a road trip to Cleveland because I'm still getting to know the region. I want to see as much of like the outdoors as I can while we're socially distanced. I'm anxious, even watching Jack White perform at SNL, to just see live music again. Like, I almost cried.
I know, I almost cried too. I was talking to Jonathan about that when he did his Van Halen tribute too. Yeah. It was very emotional.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of anxious to go to theaters and see vocalists and go to City of Asylum and see great poets. So all of that I'm missing.
Well, I can't thank you enough. I do want to give a shout out for City of Asylum. I'm on the board there. And Friday we had a gala with Salman Rushdie. So I think it's in the archives and it was quite moving. So Mark, you heard it, Mark Thomas, PRA president. If you want to know more about Mark, you can find him on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to the PRA and you can see the kinds of things that they're up to. And then you can also hear about the the Pittsburgh Region next and the campaign there. So thank you for taking the time with us, Mark. Who do we have tomorrow, Jonathan?
Tomorrow we have the president and CEO of the United Way stopping by. Lots of great work going on there. So it should be a good time. There's some great leaders like work stopping by, for sure.
Okay, so thank you. Thanks, Mark. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Stay safe. Stay safe, Mark.
Great, thank you.